Welcome back to my channel, and today we're talking about a movie I finally watched in my adult existence, which is 50 Shades of Grey. I can't believe I've never seen this movie before, but I felt like it was the right time. Boy, is this movie a treat. You'd better settle down, get yourself a cup of tea, get yourself maybe a biscuit or something, because this is going to be a lot. I talk regularly about movies on my channel, so I'll link in the description my movie night playlist and my Let's Talk About TV Shows playlist if you want to go and binge watch my videos. But without further ado, let's talk about 50 Shades of Grey. It's based off Twilight fan fiction. You can tell apparently the book was very poorly written and the movie is no better. It has quite a trashy middle school feel to it. The demographic was a lot of older women or college students or women in their 30s, which at least is reassuring in the sense that it wasn't marking a generation of 12-year-olds, because it was more older people hopefully watching the movie. So that, you know, makes me feel a little bit better about the situation, because I think that younger people watching stuff, like a lot of 12-year-olds were watching The Kissing Booth when it came out, I worry for them, because if the movie's promoting a lot of toxic habits or mindsets, then you as a child might not be able to notice or pick up on it or know that it's bad, because you haven't had enough experience yet. You're still very much malleable, so you just soak up what you see in the media and what you're told, which can be quite dangerous. I will talk about BDSM, and I did do my research for this video, although I'm not really experienced with how a lot of that stuff is. I don't have first-hand experience with it. I was never interested in it at all. I was never thinking about it at all until I realized I should look into it. So I know the basics, but I will actually link to a video from a girl called Kat, called Actual BDSMer Watches 50 Shades of Grey, simply because that video obviously is coming from someone with experience firsthand who has an interest in it. So I would recommend you go and watch that video because it makes a lot of sense. 50 Shades of Grey is marketed as often a romantic, erotic drama movie. Pushing it a little bit, that's going a bit far. I get describing it as dramatic or as erotic, fine. I wouldn't say there's anything remotely romantic about this movie. As a love interest, for instance, with Christian, I was not feeling it. I don't know why they're trying to sell a storyline like this as romantic and frame it as a romance when it so clearly isn't. So this movie is quite notable for featuring elements involving BDSM, like discipline, bondage, and this idea of dominance, submission, and a few other concepts too. For a lot of people, it was quite a game changer for them, or it opened up this conversation around a topic they'd initially considered taboo, or don't go there, or acting out fantasies maybe people would never do themselves but they're just curious about, maybe bored in their relationships and looking for some excitement or something a little bit different. So that may have contributed to the book and the movie's success. The problem with Christian and Anna's dynamic is that if you just take the BDSM aspect out of their relationship, you pretend it's not there, and you just look objectively at their conversations, how they meet, there's something very unsettling and very creepy and borderline predatory about it. And I'm being careful here because I know so many people love the book, love the movies, but I don't get behind it at all. I think it's a fun watch, but it's not cute, it's not romantic. I felt the same way about Twilight when rewatching it, thinking, God, in the first movie especially, Edward is so possessive and creepy. He watches Bella when she sleeps. How is this being sold as romantic? Maybe because I've always valued myself so much as a person, and I've always valued people speaking to me with respect and people not being creepy. I would personally feel very uncomfortable if Christian approached me, because the way he initially approaches Anna and gets to know her is undeniably weird. So let's get into the story. So excited. So Anna is an inexperienced, slightly insecure English lit student, but she has to fill in for someone else, so she needs to go and interview Christian Grey, who's a bit older than her. He's a thriving businessman. He's got everything. He's in control, he knows what he's doing, people listen to him, people respect him. So in some ways, he's quite different from Anna. And already in the first 5 minutes, I was going, and rolling my eyes. I've seen that concept way too many times of the insecure, out of her depth, uncertain woman, and then the guy is really dominating and he's got everything sorted out and he just sweeps her off her feet and he's so confident. I'm really sick of it. And there's already this slightly strange power difference there, because on the way in to interview him, she trips over and falls on the ground. And the actor for Christian, I think, was meant to be intimidating, suave, mysterious, brooding, but instead he just comes across as very creepy and way too intense and not that intimidating or suave. It doesn't work for me. He's got these big cute doe eyes. He also barely moves his face, so the acting itself seems very clunky, robotic. I don't know what's going on, because I saw him in other stuff and I actually really liked him in those roles. But then in this, it wasn't working. He just does not pull it off. I have a feeling the actor really was not comfortable with playing the role. He's said before he doesn't like the character of Christian Grey. He feels very different from the character of Christian, but the problem is it comes across. And as for Anna, the way she talks and articulates is extremely weird. I don't know what's going on with that. And she is the most boring person. She has the personality of a brick of wood. Why are we following her then? Why is she the main character? She's quite dull. But she asks him what makes him successful. By the way, their first meeting might be my least favorite scene in the whole movie, because it's so poorly put together. I feel like I'm reading a piece of fan fiction I wrote when I was 12 years old. It makes no sense. It's such a trashy, low quality scene. But she's talking to him. She says, what makes you so successful? And he starts going on this very generic, like you can tell the person who wrote it has no idea how business works or how financial stuff works or anything to do with his career, because he just says a bunch of mumbo jumbo hippy dippy stuff around business is about people and I'm good at people. The harder I worked, the more luck I had, blah blah blah. What? It's so generic. But she sat there captivated, like, oh my god, tell me more, Christian. Oh my god, you're so intelligent. It really wasn't that impressive, but she's acting as if, wow. And afterwards, she's so taken aback, as if this was a truly mind-blowing, life-changing experience. She's standing out in the rain like, oh my god, who was that? A few sentences later, after him telling her stuff about business and his success that's very vague, she says, I feel like your heart is a little bigger than you might let on, which was so tonally off and jarring. It did not make sense. She's just spoken to him. She's just met him. He just said a few things around maybe being a bit guarded, and she jumped to, your heart is bigger than you let on. And also, that's such a personal and intrusive, invasive comment. I could not imagine anyone saying that to me after 2 seconds of knowing me, because that's weird. After such a short amount of time of knowing him, how could you pick up on such a major part of his personality like this? It just doesn't make any sense. You can't be that perceptive, nor would you verbalize it like that. And then she makes another weirdly personal observation when she says she gets the feeling that a lot of people don't know him well. I was like, dang, she's really crossing the line here. So we're already setting Christian up as this mysterious tough guy. And then she asks him about hobbies and interests. And Christian says he's interested in physical pursuits, alluding to his kinks when it comes to the bedroom. But that's not a hobby. Wouldn't you say tennis, sewing, hanging out with my family? I feel as if the writers who wrote this had no idea about what BDSM is or had no experience with it themselves. And later she bumps into him where she works in the store. He's come to buy rope, tape, cable ties. So she makes a joke about him being a serial killer, but seriously, it was just slightly unsettling. And they've only met like once at this point, so keep that in mind, that they don't know each other very well. And she's talking about him getting different layers of clothing and being quite polite. Then he says, I could take my clothes off, which was really gross and predatory rather than flirtatious. And then she's still in the process of saying goodbye and he just walks out, which I thought was so dismissive and rude. Again, is this supposed to be romantic? Because so far I was just feeling violated and uncomfortable. And he asks her out for coffee, asks if she's dating anyone. One of her friends she's seen hanging out with a lot, and she says no, she's not. And she says, I find you intimidating, and his response is, you should. In every aspect of his life, he's just very controlling controlling and very dominating, and that, objectively as it is, in their day-to-day conversations, I could not get behind. I found it slightly weird. Then she tells him she's a romantic, and he seems a bit disappointed with that information, or shocked perhaps, like this isn't going to work, because he doesn't want that conventional flowers and kisses romance. There's just a real lack of compatibility there and goals, and what he's into is fine, but it's more something that's for him to do and not to drag her into, because they would never be able to fully meet each other's needs in some senses. So he ends the coffee date again quite rudely and abruptly, and she's really confused as to if she's done something wrong. Walking down the street, then a bike almost knocks her over, so he grabs her and he looks into her eyes and touches her face, and she's closing her eyes and making these weird facial expressions that are very uncomfortable to watch somehow. And then he says, "I'm not the man for you. You should steer clear of me." Vibe-wise, it was so jarring, it just didn't work, it didn't feel right, but at least he was being honest with her. Suddenly, I guess he's interested again, because Anna receives a package from him containing first edition copies of this book. I feel like that's the writers trying to imply that it's romantic, but it just isn't, because I kept getting the impression he was trying to buy her love. The helicopter ride he took her on, buying her a car, and later that night she goes out drinking with her friends and she ends up drunk dialing Christian, and he says, "I'm going to come to pick you up because you're not safe." And then when she goes outside, that person that she thought was her friend was actually being super creepy, trying to kiss her when she wasn't comfortable. And that's a huge thing I've noticed not only in fan fiction but in young adult movies and books, where the love interest is a douchebag. So in order to try and make him seem less creepy and more likable, they put her in a situation where sexual assault or harassment is used as a plot device in order to push her closer to the creepy love interest and make him seem like a better person than he is, which is what happens here, because Christian is effectively her knight in shining armor coming to save her. And the next morning she's woken up at his place, got a new t-shirt on she wasn't wearing the night before, and he comes in and lectures her, saying she needs to take better care of herself. He'd actually changed her, and that was already just making me a bit uncomfortable, even if he felt like he needed to. As a first-time viewer, right, my reaction was just like, oh my god, he didn't just say that. He says something totally crossing the line and creepy, like, "If you were mine, I wouldn't let you sit down for a week," or some weird, was it an innuendo? I don't know what it was, but all I know was I was gagging and throwing up in my mouth a little bit.
"If you were mine, you wouldn't be able to sit down for a week."
What? He stands in front of her and pulls his shirt off in front of her. I can only imagine that I'm in this strange man's home. I barely know him. He's already, crossed the lines. It's already gotten a bit touchy-feely, because he brought you home, he got you dressed when you'd thrown up over yourself, and now he's standing in the bedroom, slowly peeling off his shirt. I would be so scared if I was in that situation. I would be thinking something really awful was about to happen to me. It was scary. And then he crawls onto the bed and takes a bite out of the piece of toast she's holding. Again, no! Red flag, red flag. If someone does that to you, run. And then he says, "I'm incapable of leaving you alone." Christian! Also, why did he take her back to his hotel room when she was drunk? Why didn't he just bring her home? That's really weird. You get the impression he's trying to set up some barriers, set some boundaries, keep some distance. Then later he's talking to her and full on flirting with her, so he keeps going back on his word. And then he says, after she bites her lip, "I'd like to bite that lip." I was like, no, make it go away, make it go away. I'm just imagining I was biting my lip because I was thinking or concentrating really hard, and then some guy says, "I'd like to bite that lip." I'd be like, please, please. Call 999. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe this is down to, what type of flirting works for you and what you like, but I would be very uncomfortable if someone said that to me, considering they don't know each other very well. And then he says, "I'd like to touch you, but I need your written consent." They're in the elevator and he sees her biting her lip, and at some point when he sees that, he is so overwhelmed by how attractive it is, grabs her and starts making out with her in the elevator, all aggressive and angsty, and pinning her up against the wall. Out of all the kisses they have in the movie, I think that was the most passion-filled wild one. Anyway, they're hanging out later and talking about this non-disclosure agreement where she won't be going and talking about it to other people. Again, that's him implying that he does want to pursue something with her, but he's got some stuff he wants her to sign and some stuff he wants her to consent to. And then she says, "Are you going to make love to me now?" Then he corrects her and says, "No, I don't make love." It's good because he's communicating what he likes, so she would get an idea of what he'd be like, so she knows what she's signing up for. But another part of me found that very creepy. You get the idea that there's some consent involved in the sense that he is showing her what kind of a person that he would be, and she's like, okay, I'm still curious, I'm interested. So if she was sensing something weird, she definitely would have known at that point because he's been giving her so many hints about the kind of person he is. Her saying, well, I'm interested, is showing curiosity and meeting him halfway. Then he takes her to his playroom, his red room, which is full of BDSM toys and gear. This was overly dramatic, mysterious, like leading her into the room and letting her walk around without much context. It's just like, I've got to show you something. Considering it's not that big a deal, it's just what he's into, it was set up to be this really creepy thing. And then he informs her that he's got a second contract, which will be one of dominance and submission, and there'll be no romantic relationship. It will have all these terms and agreements and boxes to tick. So at least he's communicating with her, I suppose, what kind of a person he is, what he wants from life, and he tells her he's a dominant. I was scared for her because of her ignorance. She'll be jumping into something where she's not even starting at level 0. She'll just be going from level 0 to 100 because she tells him that she's actually a virgin. So she's never done anything with anyone before. She might not know her own body very well. She might not know what she wants and what she doesn't want. And there's something concerning about that to me. I'll touch on that later. Anyway, in a more romantic, I guess, way, he takes her virginity and he again talks about the BDSM part. And she says, well, what would I get out of this? Basically implying, I'm not into BDSM, so what would I get out of it? Because it's certainly not pleasure. And he says, you'd get me out of it. That just doesn't sound right. The contract has a lot of very weirdly specific things about what she can and can't do, such as when she touches him and her contraception, where she buys it from, what she'll wear, just very specific things. It does have sections for her to check off, like how much pain is the submissive willing to experience? Does the submissive consent to being gagged? There is a list of things there for her to negotiate, right? So they had this whole business meeting type thing where she was like, take that off the list. I'm not doing that, which is good in the sense that they're communicating what they are and aren't comfortable with. So he's also letting her know in advance the kind of options they have in terms of what they might do. So she's prepared in advance and she's aware this isn't black or white. So if there's some differing opinion, I get it because there's so much discussion to be had around this movie. But one of my issues with the contract is sign this. Here's some safe words you can use if you're feeling uncomfortable or like it's pushing you past your limits. But in general, what if she'd signed it and then she woke up the next morning and she was like, I don't want to be your submissive anymore. I want to actually be dominant from time to time, or I want us to not do BDSM stuff at all. Be passionate and in love with you, and that's all I want. I don't want anything else. Lots of people do this BDSM stuff and they're very aware of keeping it healthy and making sure both parties want to do it. But I don't get that vibe with Christian. Anyway, they try out a few things that aren't super crazy or intense, like her just tying her wrists together, and then he says, do you trust me? I think that was meant to be reassuring for us, like of course she does, but why would she trust him? She barely knows him. I wouldn't trust him. This was worrying to me. She says to Christian she's still not keen on being tortured in his red room of pain and being whipped and being his sex slave. Call it off, guys. This isn't working because his perception of these activities you'll do together is very different. She feels like she's sacrificing what she wants in order to please him because she has negative associations with this stuff. It's like she's not really into it and she's not wanting to do that, but she's feeling obligated to in order to keep him. Whereas with him, he actually really enjoys that stuff because he says it's about pleasure. It's about you as a submissive feeling free, letting go, not needing to think all the time, not needing to control stuff all the time. So he's got very positive associations with it. So really, he should be with someone who's on exactly the same page and actually has some experience with doing this stuff. I don't think she's even curious at this point. I think she just wants a normal, not normal, but you know what I mean, traditional vanilla relationship. But then Christian takes Anna out to eat and he reveals that he lost his virginity at age 15 to one of his mother's friends, Eleanor, and that he was the woman's submissive abusive for 6 years. And that made me look at his interest in BDSM in a different way, and it made me look at him in a different way, and it just overall was a very damaging thing to add to the storyline because he's traumatized. Anyway, she and Christian are emailing each other, and Anna's teasing him about the contract and playing it out a bit like, will I or won't I sign it? Will I do this? Will I not? And she does take some time to weigh it up and process it, which I do like. She's not just jumping into it. You can see that he's apparently falling for her, or he's saying stuff like, what are you doing to me? As in, you're making me have feelings for you. But honestly, it just doesn't work because I'm not buying this as a romance. Their whole relationship is very weird in nature. She was ignoring him for a while. They were having problems because he was going out to hang out with his former groomer, saying they're friends and they're on good terms, and that was just too much for her. So she wasn't answering his calls and she went out to hang out with her mum. And then he texted her saying something like, oh, are you gonna order another one of those drinks? Implying that he knows what drink she's ordered, so he's in the room somewhere, which is obviously extremely creepy. And it means he knows her location somehow. He's followed her there, try and keep tabs on her. And then he turns up and I was like, oh my God, this is not romantic. This is possessive and creepy. After a while, this tension between them comes to a head because she's continually trying to get him to open up about why he is the way he is. But then she says, punish me or do whatever you're really into in order to give me an idea of how extreme a BDSM relationship with you could be. Show me your worst. And he says he'll give her spankings, and he does. You could just blame him in that situation, but also in terms of her, the vibe I was getting with her throughout the whole movie, and it finally climaxes in this scene, is that she doesn't know how to set her own boundaries, or she's not sure what she is and isn't comfortable with. She doesn't know herself because she told him to do it. She said, do it. So he was like, okay, sure. Then he does it, and she cannot deal with it, and she found it extremely scary and it made her feel unsafe. Is this what you want to do? Is this what you want to see? You want to see me crying and in pain? Is this sexy to you? So it's just bad. His experience with this, surely he should have noticed that she was very ignorant around this stuff and it could be traumatizing for her. In that case, he should be saying, we'll just do baby steps. It was very intense straight away, and he should have known that she just would not be into it. But I just briefly want to talk about BDSM, the BDSM community, the reaction. So I, like I said, didn't know a whole lot about it until I did some research. So please keep in mind, I do not have personal experience with this stuff. I don't know all the ins and outs and complexities. In some senses, maybe the movie and the book was empowering for some women because it was this idea of exploring your sensuality and doing things that aren't talked about, maybe that aren't always in the mainstream, or taking a risk with your partner, not just doing the same routine things and doing different things, even if it doesn't involve BDSM, just pushing the boundaries a little to keep stuff interesting and spice it up. So I like that aspect of it genuinely. However, what I don't like is that, first of all, Christian's a freaking weirdo. I wouldn't mind if it was BDSM if their relationship was super healthy, but it's not. And this movie promotes the message that guys need to be aggressive and overly masculine and tough in order to get girls to like them. And in turn, girls want a guy who will push them around and control them. And that Christian's emotional hang-ups and issues and trauma maybe will be softened a bit by Anna's love, or that she can change him and make him fall in love with her, because earlier he's like, no, I don't date, I don't do that, and by the end he's like, oh, I think I'm falling in love with you, and it's just not working for me. Again, that sends a toxic message that you can change a guy or he'll be different when he's with you. BDSM in itself, just take that whole thing aside, that is not the problem here. That's not what I'm taking issue with here, or saying, oh my god, it shouldn't be in movies, or there's something wrong with it, because there's not. The problem is Anna and Christian, basically. The problem is Christian, because their relationship with him as a human being is not this romantic thing. The way he treats her is not romantic. It's literally red flags of an abusive relationship. It's not something you should consider cute, because he was in some ways stalking her or wanting to know her location, and even when she was drunk at the party, she wasn't telling him her location on purpose, right? And then he said, oh, forget it, I'm gonna come and pick you up, I'm gonna find you. How did he know where she was? That's creepy. There's too much of that going on, and that's a real problem in relationships where they become abusive, when you notice that your partner is constantly controlling what you do, who you talk to, when you go out, and also intimidation. That's another red flag of an abusive relationship early on is that they're making you feel uncomfortable and intimidating you, and Christian does that to Anna multiple times, and at points it's played off like she doesn't mind or that she likes it, but the way he speaks to her is obviously weird, because it's not like she's speaking to him in that very sexualized way and then he's doing it back and they're both comfortable with that. No, half the movie, especially early on, is him coming onto her really hard in a very sexual way and her being like, stop. But she's not really giving it back in turn. She's a bit shy, like, oh. And also isolation, because a lot of the time it's like you can't talk to anyone else. Who was that guy you were talking to, Anna? Have you got a boyfriend? And Anna herself shows signs of someone who could end up in an abusive relationship with Christian because of her altered, warped identity that happens when she's with him, where she's suddenly saying stuff like, I don't know who I am. I don't know. I don't know what I want in a relationship. I don't know what my body wants. I don't know what to consent to. And then when they're negotiating the contract, she does seem to be asserting who she is a bit more, like, no, I don't want that. I'm definitely not going to do butt clamps or whatever they are. Take that off the list. No way in hell. And she's being a bit more assertive with what she wants. But at other points in the movie, it was a bit all over the place. I really got the sense that she didn't know who she was. And she wasn't doing the BDSM stuff because she was really into it and it just worked for her. I got the vibe she was doing it because she just liked him so much romantically and for some reason was really attached to him for no apparent reason and was trying to hold on to him. People were saying that in the second movie, he stalks her at an art show, steals her financial information, purchases the company she works for, so he actually has some deep-rooted problems. Didn't he buy Anna a computer in the movie as well? Which really shows the kind of person he is, and again, how they just don't work as a couple, because she wants these romantic gestures and emotional intimacy, and his idea of openness and emotional intimacy or winning her is through material stuff, like buying her things. Also, Anna viewed his dominating preferences in bed specifically as part of what makes him so messed up, and that was one of the big obstacles in the movie. One of the main aspects of it is, oh my god, I like him so much, but there's just this one teeny thing. We have completely different tastes in bed, and out of it, I want this romantic relationship, which he doesn't want to give me, and he's a freaking weirdo who stares at her like a tiger who wants to eat her every second. But the main conflict really for her isn't so much that he's this freaky weirdo who stares her down all the time and is really gross. It's more the fact that in the bedroom specifically, she's not sure whether she likes or doesn't like this kinky BDSM stuff, but he does like it. And the problem with that is then it frames people in the BDSM community, no matter what spectrum of BDSM they're doing, like how much or how little of it they do or what kinds of things they do, it frames people who are into that as really almost dangerous people, or that being into that is some kind of character flaw and makes you messed up. So BDSM is associated with abuse or creepiness or being a problem, and that's just a huge generalization. And I never had an issue with Christian being into BDSM. Like, that's not the problem here. The problem is that outside of the BDSM stuff, he's terrifying. I will say too, another issue just in general with the dynamic of her being so shy and unsure and him owning this big company and being a great businessman and having everything sorted is that it kind of portrays this idea of it being normal for a woman to always be the one who's submitting in a relationship, or men becoming aggressive with you or overly tough with you. With the virgin thing, I just want to talk about that for a second. It worries me because I got the vibe she was very limited in terms of what her body likes and how it actually works in bed for her, because everybody is different. I got the feeling she didn't really know herself and she was still figuring herself out and exploring her sexuality, and that's an issue because then she's jumping right into this very intense relationship with him when that may not be what she actually wants because she doesn't know herself. She's quite easily molded in general. She seems like quite a weak personality type with how she interacts, as in she doesn't know what turns her on. She doesn't know what makes her feel safe. He has this guilty conscience and this sense of feeling gross, like, oh, I can't bring this girl into bed with me, into this world of stuff that's different from anything she's ever done because she's never even even kissed a guy probably, or maybe she has, but she hasn't done much at all. He feels like, okay, I should at first sleep with her and take her virginity so that I can do all this BDSM stuff with her with a clean conscience, and that in itself rubs me the wrong way. He is literally the epitome of the emotionally unavailable guy that you see in movies who's not ready for a relationship until he meets the woman who changes him, which is such bullshit, by the way. If a guy is telling you he doesn't want a relationship or he's with someone else, but he's implying that maybe he'll get together with you, just be aware with stuff like that, that often it's not like in the movies. For instance, if a guy is with someone else, he probably isn't going to leave that person to be with you, or if he does, it might not be this romantic thing you want it to be, or if he only ever does physical stuff and he doesn't want a relationship, a lot of the time you can't force him to change or force him to be different. And that's an issue with Anna and Christian, is it's like his thinking she'll come round to the BDSM stuff, or she'll like it even though she literally was a virgin 10 seconds ago, so how the hell would she know? And then with her, she's hoping that she can change him to be open with her and be, you know, communicative with her and have this romantic relationship and go on dates, but that's not working, so you're never going to work. And even the fact that he is so crazy intense that he does not even want to sleep in the same bed as her. He acts like just because he has some kinks or whatever, that means that he can't express affection in a relationship or softness, because the whole movie he is ice cold. Like, I don't date, okay? I'm aggressive. I don't do that stuff. These are my personal thoughts on the movie and the way the relationship is portrayed and the power dynamic between them at all points in the movie. So take what I say with a grain of salt, and I'm more than happy to have conversations about it with you guys down in the comments. And also be aware that I finished watching this movie like today, so this is my initial impression of it in my mind and my initial reaction to it. It may change over time. I may get some perspective or feel differently about it in retrospect in a few years. I think there is some room for debate within this topic. However, the one thing I will not change my view on is the fact that I think Christian is a very strange man. So that is my review for today. You can let me know what you think in the comments, and I would also love it if you subscribed to this channel and join the family. Make sure you click the bell icon, and then also you get all notifications. It's very important. Otherwise, YouTube's doing some weird stuff where it doesn't always notify you, so that's really good if you actually want to see what I'm uploading. And follow me on my social media, and I will see you guys for my next video.